Just so you know, this show is about scary stuff. So don't say I didn't warn you guys. And remember, don't be scared.
Episode 61, Ethan's Laws. Warbaby here with another episode of Murderous Minors. The county and state departments tasked with protecting children in this country constantly make the news for a multitude of generally negative reasons. I mean, their job seems so easy, right? Protect children. But clearly, there are obstacles and bureaucracy and poor management and lack of funds and countless valid reasons why what the public sees so clearly in hindsight is usually too large to see until it explodes in our faces. DHS, CPS, DCFS, or whatever it's called in your state, we've all seen reports of the deaths of children who are supposed to be being protected by the system. When a child is removed and placed elsewhere, especially with family, we think, oh good, now they'll be safe. And I'm sure that's what those around 7-year-old Ethan Hauschultz felt, knowing how overtaxed the foster care system has become. If there's a relative to take him and his siblings, bless their heart. So in 2016, Ethan was removed from his family's home in Manitowac, Wisconsin, along with his siblings. 3 of the 4 kids were placed in the care of their great-uncle, Timothy Hauschultz, and his wife, Tina McKeever Hauschultz. The state refers to this practice as kinship care, and the fact that he was a convicted felon didn't hinder the decision. Timothy had an extensive criminal record, including a felony child abuse charge from 2009 that was pled down to misdemeanor disorderly conduct, after he stayed out of trouble for 18 months. He had been accused of assaulting his sons by hitting them with a 6-foot-long carpenter's level and then hitting the older boy in the head with a piece of wood. But his convictions date back to the age of 15 when he was in a bar fight and attacked a man with a tire iron. 3 years later, he joined in with friends in beating a man who ended up in intensive care. At 19, he violently robbed a convenience store, threatening the clerk with a butcher knife and terrorizing her over a measly $200. She told police she could tell he was having a good time. While expecting his first child, Timothy received his first prison sentence. He told the judge, quote, "I put memories of darkness in people's minds. I hurt people physically. If I don't change my life, they'll have to always be afraid of me or wonder if I'll attack them or anyone else again." He told the judge he needed treatment for alcoholism, anger issues, and psychiatric disturbance. But the judge said, quote, "The only thing this court can do to protect society from him is to put him in prison." The judge also said he had, quote, "no business fathering children," before he was given a total sentence of almost 8 years in prison for the robbery, as well as for writing bad checks. 10 years later, and free again, Timothy attacked a fellow diner in a local restaurant, holding a knife to his throat. 10 years after that would bring the child abuse charges. 7 more years brought Ethan and his siblings to his home. All of this case information was and is free to be found at the Manitowac County Courthouse, but by the time late 2016 came around, Timothy was the best fit to care for these children, as multiple neglect cases had been opened against the mother, and one against their father, Timothy's nephew. Of the substantiated reports made to CPS, 2 determined that the mother had neglected all 4 of the children, 1 determined that the father had neglected all 4 children, and 1 concluded that the mother's boyfriend had physically abused Ethan. Of the unsubstantiated claims, the oldest dates back to 2009, when Ethan's mother was accused of unborn child abuse while pregnant with one of his sisters, followed by a neglect accusation of the sister 9 months later against both parents. 2012 saw a report of abuse against Ethan's twin by an unnamed abuser called the, quote, unknown maltreater in court documents. 6 months later, a claim of abuse of the twins and one sister came in against the mother, and in September of 2015, she was again accused of neglecting all 4 children. One of these unsubstantiated claims contained allegations of sexual abuse against one of her daughters. According to the Manitowac Police Department, the mother's home, which was owned by her mother, was the source of over 50 police reports in just under a 2-year period from 2013 to 2015. 11 were loud music complaints, 8 were dogs on the loose calls, 8 were 911 hang-ups, 5 were for disorderly conduct, 2 were for child abuse, and the rest were for issues like underage drinking, suspicious persons, and curfew violations. Ethan's mom's house sparked her neighborhood to implement a neighborhood watch group, as they were used to her grandmother residing there in a quiet, elderly kind of way. What they had now was what her lawyer would call a person, quote, with a different lifestyle than her grandmother. The property eventually racked up thousands of dollars in fines with the city and was deemed a nuisance property. According to the Herald Times reporter, SWAT had been to the property, suspicious people had hidden in neighboring backyards, and suspects were interviewed by police in neighbors' driveways. Though Andrea and her kids always lived there, various other adults resided there at different times. A period of relative quiet had recently taken place in the winter, and her lawyer attributed this to some of the occupants of the home being in jail. Ethan's grandmother, the property owner, signed a nuisance abatement plan making her responsible for trying to control what went on at the property she was ultimately in charge of. All 4 of the children were removed the following year. The 5-bedroom, 3-bath house on Clover Road in rural Newton, Wisconsin was spacious at 3,600 square feet, and sitting on almost 2 acres, had plenty of room to raise the 5 kids who'd now be living there. In addition to Ethan, his twin brother Anthony, and their 8-year-old sister, their great-uncle Timothy's teenage stepson and daughter already lived there, as did his wife, Tina. She spent the week in Green Bay, Wisconsin, so she could attend community college, and Timothy owned a business washing barns. Well checks were conducted by the Department of Health Services only until legal guardianship was official, then it was no longer required. This left Damian and Tina's older kids to take care of the younger kids. Damian, at 14, was subject to the same harsh punishment as the younger kids, but had the added task of supervising their punishments when ordered to do so. Ethan had gotten in trouble at school for talking back to his teacher, and Damian was in charge of his punishments that day. It was a frigid day, April 20th, 2018, and Damian had zero interest in having to spend 2 hours outside walking laps. But he was in charge of the twins' punishment when they were doled out by Timothy, and Damian himself had been recently assigned laps as well. He'd given the kids Bible verses to memorize, and when Damian failed to do so appropriately, he got 1 week to walk laps around the yard for 2 hours per day, carrying wood. That's what Timothy called the punishments he gave the kids, carrying wood. He told investigators that he makes them circle the wood pile out back while carrying a heavy stump, allowing them to stop and rest for 5 seconds at the end of each lap before picking the wood up again and continuing the cycle. Ethan's legal guardian called the boy clumsy, acknowledging that the yard was muddy and wet from recent snowstorm Evelyn, during which the boys had also been forced to carry wood. That Friday, April 20th, was the final day in the kids' week of punishment, and Damian was fed up. Every time 7-year-old Ethan's tiny feet slipped in the slush, he landed on his back. The 45-pound tree stump he was forced to hold in front of him as he marched would hit his chest and knock the air from his lungs. Apparently, Ethan and his twin brother had been dropping their piece of wood every 5 minutes, and Damian was growing more and more irritated. The boys marched on in the cold for more than an hour before Ethan fell and didn't get up again. The other kids thought that he was just messing around, not wanting to get up and finish out the 2 hours on his feet. Damian pushed him face down into an icy puddle, stripped down to his regular clothes, warm boots and coat removed. He weighed over 100 pounds more than Ethan, yet he stood on his back and on his head. In the end, he endured 100 kicks and blows, and when he stopped getting up from the ground, Damian brought shovelful after shovelful of snow from the lawn. He packed the little boy in, piling approximately 80 pounds of ice on top of and around him, making sure to leave his face unobscured. Damian told investigators, quote, "Because we knew he had to breathe, like I'm not that stupid," then chuckled when telling them that Ethan was now, quote, "in his own little coffin of snow." The other Hauschultz kids in the yard that day urged Damian to uncover little Ethan, and when they did, it had been almost 30 minutes. Damian said he realized they could have an issue, and that they, quote, "may have made him a bit cold." He called Timothy and Tina multiple times and told them that Ethan was, quote, "playing or acting like he's dead." The adults arrived home and they drove Ethan to Holy Family Memorial Medical Center, where he died surrounded by his family. On the way to the hospital, Timothy told Damian they needed to get an attorney and not to say anything that would get anyone else in trouble. Damian said he was told to tell police if asked that nothing had happened or that Ethan had fallen from a tree. He described being bored and feeling trapped in a prison-like home once Timothy and Tina became legal guardians to the 3 younger kids. He said they took the fun out of his life. Let me just take a minute and tell you guys how glad I am to have Audible in my life. The current situation has caused every event I've been looking forward to be postponed, including the last podcast book tour to promote their last book on the left. The minute the book was released, my daughter downloaded it into our Audible, and I was so happy that I could enjoy it on release day. I couldn't have done that without Audible, so if you need a bit of impromptu joy in your day, visit audible.com/warbaby or text warbaby to 500-500 and get your first title free. Audible is the leading provider of spoken word entertainment, and membership gets you 1 credit per month to pick any title, plus 2 Audible originals from a monthly selection, and access to daily news digests and guided meditations. Text warbaby to 500-500 or visit audible.com/warbaby and get ready to bring some joy into your day. The police report stated, Damian said he doesn't say no to Timothy. It is not worth arguing with Timothy. Autopsy results concluded, quote, "strenuous physical punishment outdoors and prolonged environmental exposure caused the death of the 2nd grader. In addition to the hypothermia, there were multiple blunt force traumas to the head, resulting in an acute subdural hemorrhage, and to the abdomen and chest, breaking his 11th rib and causing a kidney bleed. There were abrasions and contusions to the neck, head, chest, abdomen, and back, as well as soft tissue bleeding. An infrared image revealed an actual boot impression visible on little Ethan's back. Days after Ethan's death, the children's mother said, quote, "He was in the care of his uncle's 14-year-old son for 2 hours. When his uncle got back, they found Ethan unconscious and they drove him to the hospital." She told WIXX Fox 11, quote, "I was picked up at work by a sheriff and they told me that Ethan had been taken to the emergency room and that it was not good. When I got there, Ethan did not have a heartbeat, his temperature was 23 degrees, and they worked on him for 5 hours, giving him CPR at the time and still couldn't get a heartbeat. I want justice for my son. The person responsible should go to jail for a very long time. Nobody has gotten arrested. I mean, my child died for no reason whatsoever."
When his uncle came back, Ethan was unconscious in the backyard, and he drove him to Holy Family. She had informed me that Ethan had not had a heartbeat for quite some time. When you're that cold, your heart doesn't work by itself, so what they were trying to do was warm up his body temperature to get his heart to start again. They were giving him round-the-clock CPR. A lot of people lost their lives